Tacos are a popular item from the menu at Chipotle Mexican Grill, and there are 3 Chipotles in the Gainesville area for all your taco cravings. Chipotle Mexican Grill was first opened in 1993 in Colorado. Their explosion of growth in the last 25 years has resulted in more than 2,000 locations in the US, UK, Canada, Germany, and France. Our taco will consist of a flour tortilla, carnitas, which is a Mexican dish made of very tender pork, Monterey Jack cheese, and tomatoes. These ingredients come from all over the world. Chipotle's core motto is food with integrity, and their goals are to source very high-quality ingredients that meet certain standards and are freshly prepared by hand at each restaurant, which is why they proudly proclaim there are no freezers, microwaves, or can openers at their restaurants. Chipotle's flour tortillas are made of wheat flour from various U.S. states, canola oil from Canada, salt from the U.S. and Canada, and water. The U.S. flour market has experienced growth in recent years because of the expansion of downstream industries such as tortilla production. Tortillas, like those used by Chipotle, have an exceptionally fast growth rate in this segment at more than 6% per year. In 2016, wheat production in the U.S. generated about $9 billion, and in 2017, wheat flour accounted for 44.7%, the largest market share of U.S. flour. U.S. imports of canola oil reached $3.5 million in 2017, and Canadian canola accounted for about 35% of that. The production of canola oil in Canada contributes $26.7 billion to the Canadian economy each year, providing over 250,000 jobs and $11 billion in wages. Therefore, Chipotle's use of Canadian canola is key in supporting a major economic engine in Canada. The majority of Chipotle's salt comes from U.S. suppliers and is used in a plethora of their food, including the flour tortillas. According to the U.S. Geological Survey's mineral report, salt production in the U.S. in 2017 had a total value of about $2 billion, with the top producing states among the salt suppliers listed by Chipotle. These states produced about 95% of all salt in the U.S., and less than 3% of that is exported. The pork for Chipotle carnitas comes from Canada, the United Kingdom, and various U.S. states. In 2017, Canada accounted for 99% of the fresh pork imported to the United States, at a little over $582 million for the year. This makes sense when you consider the effects of overseas travel time on fresh meat. One thing that doesn't make much sense is that Chipotle touts that their meat is never frozen, but they import some pork from the UK. In 2017, the U.S. imported only frozen pork from the U.K. at just over $41 million. This individual factor doesn't seem to fit into Chipotle's core values. Another point of contention is U.S. pork and beef farmers who complain that there are plenty of domestic meat suppliers who meet Chipotle's standards but feel like they've been shut out by the growing restaurant chain whose business would add value to U.S. pork production. The U.S. meat and poultry industry is the largest segment of U.S. agriculture, providing 6 million jobs and generating over $864 billion annually, which is roughly 6% of the entire U.S. GDP. So what are these standards Chipotle is looking for in their pork suppliers? Chipotle advertises that its pork is responsibly raised, and there's been some controversy over the meaning of that label. Here are Chipotle's qualifications for responsibly raised pork. Responsibly raised isn't a term that is regulated by the U.S. government, and Chipotle doesn't require their producers to hold any kind of certifications to meet their standards. However, Chipotle does conduct their own audits of meat suppliers to make sure they're adhering to the requirements. In 2015, a carnitas shortage was created when Chipotle suspended one of its meat suppliers because they weren't adhering to the responsibly raised standards. Chipotle's Monterey Jack cheese is made from cheese cultures from Denmark, milk from the U.S., the same salt used in the flour tortillas, and vegetable rennet. A couple of these ingredients are hard to trace with any certainty. For instance, the origin of vegetable rennet is unspecified, but the description of the product from Chipotle says that it is a vegetarian substance used to create Monterey Jack cheese. Additionally, Chipotle lists cheese cultures from Denmark as a specific ingredient, which helps the vegetable rennet turn the milk into a solid block of cheese. But in researching trade information on cheese cultures, it's lumped together with all lactic cultures, which can also be used for yogurt, sour cream, and other products, not specifically cheese. However, I did find that in 2017, the U.S. imported about $27 million in solid cheese from Denmark with a 17.93% tariff. Most importantly, 100% of Chipotle's milk supply comes from the U.S. In 2017, the U.S. produced $82.4 billion of milk and only exported about $1.4 billion of it. This means that over 98% of milk produced in the U.S. is consumed domestically. The dairy industry has a huge economic impact among U.S. agricultural commodities, with 2017 milk sales ranking fourth behind only cattle, corn, and soybeans. Chipotle's tomatoes, which are used in a handful of products, are from Mexico and various U.S. states. In 2017, Mexico exported a total of $1.9 billion in tomatoes, and 99% of those were to the U.S. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Mexican producers have been moving from open field production to protected agriculture technologies in recent years, resulting in higher yields. And the amount planted in Mexico is influenced by the behavior of the U.S. market, as growers try to plant only what the U.S. market will absorb. Coincidentally, about 96% of U.S. tomato exports go to Canada. All components of the carnitas tacos we investigated contain ingredients sourced from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, which is why the North American Free Trade Agreement is so important to our economies and has received a lot of attention in the political arena lately. The goal of NAFTA was to eliminate barriers to trade and investment between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, with agriculture being a contentious segment of the agreement. For instance, Canada still protects its dairy industry by imposing tariffs on the U.S. dairy imports to Canada. Chipotle is now a $22 billion burrito empire that started from an aspiring American chef's love of San Francisco taquerias. The next time you walk into a Chipotle in Gainesville, you can now recognize that the main ingredients in your taco have a positive influence on trade, mostly within NAFTA countries.